I'm Amy Schenk from the Alzheimer's Association. I am the program manager. I'm actually based in our Bonita Springs office, but I do have a fun fact about my connection with Charlotte County. Okay? Now, I know it may shock you, but I actually am the women's gold medalist in the 50-meter dash in the Charlotte Senior Games. Okay? Now, I forgot my medal. Now, that may sound kind of exciting to you, and I want it to because I get to go to the state senior games, so I'm really excited. And my daughter said to me, well, that's good, Mom. And then I told her I was the only one in the event in my age group, and it kind of tarnished things. So I'm still really excited. Aside, I'm really slow. I've never run track and field in my life, but I figure, what the heck, I'm gonna do it. So you're reigning gold medalist for Charlotte County. Okay, that's not why we're here. You got some wonderful information earlier on, and I have, and actually Rob has these on the memory mobile, the basics of Alzheimer's disease. So we love it when you take our stuff. So I have some of those on the back table, and we also have some on the memory mobile. And I think we touched on what it's like to be a caregiver and how hard that is. So I also have a handout that talks about 10 ways to manage caregiver stress. It would be wonderful if we could get rid of all of the stress in our life. But you know what? If you turn on the TV or you drive in Southwest Florida, I don't know about you, but I seem to have a lot of stress. So we're going to get started today, and what we're going to talk about is understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, I bet you didn't think that I was going to make you work, but I am. So let's see if I can use the clicker. Now, we could listen to that music forever, but I don't know about you. I'm kind of over it after the first couple. Okay, here we go. I need technical help. I always need technical help. The magic is happening. Don't you love technology that's smarter than you? Because heaven knows I do. And it's a good thing I have teenagers because they explain to me how ridiculous I am. Like, Mom, it's so easy. Well, clearly it's not easy, so don't let your kids tell you that. So here's some of the things we're going to do today, and I'm going to switch my hands here. Didn't know I was going to be two-fisted. Usually I have a cup of coffee in one of these hands, so. Let the magic work. It's not going to work.
I'll hit the next one. You tell me what.
You know what? Let me do that. So we're gonna do this in a creative way. I'm gonna walk around because I can make that happen. Show me how to. Okay. So here's what you're gonna learn today. And the good news is there's no test. So what we want to be able to do is want you to understand the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia. Know how Alzheimer's disease impacts the brain. We talked a little bit about earlier on how infection and how delirium and how some of the changes that happen as a result of that can occur. And usually those things come on suddenly. With dementia and Alzheimer's disease, it's a slower progression, and sometimes that can be kind of a clue for you what's going on. We're going to touch on the risk factors. We're going to go through the 3 stages. There are currently some approved treatments to help with symptoms. So we'll touch on those. And we're also going to talk a little bit about what's going on in research, and then also share with you, and I'm going to give you the best secret, the best resource the Alzheimer's Association has, and it is not me. So, although I am a resource, we have a wonderful resource for all of you. So I told you, you didn't know that you were going to get to be quizzed today. But hey, it's Saturday and it's the morning, and if I'm going to work on a Saturday, I want you to work too. So let's see what question comes up. Okay, now I'm going to also tell you something. The 2019 statistics just came out, and this slide is already outdated. So how many think, we're going to look at how many Americans are currently living with the disease. How many say 850,000? 5.7 million. Any takers? Okay. 12 million. 3.4 million. I'm sorry, there's no prize for the winners here. Actually, it's 5.8 million. So 5.7. What we do is we look at our information and we update it every year. So 5.8 million. No. Okay, you're right, I'm wrong. How many unpaid caregivers? All right, now we know there's a heck of a lot of them, right? So 1.2 million, 8.5 million, 13 million? How about 16.1 million? 16.1 million. I need Rob to do the slides, please. And you're wonderful, and the reason I say that is because we came up with a wonderful new presentation. It's different than the old one, and it has all these little tricks, and it's not intuitive. So notice, thank you so much for your help, but Rob knows his presentation a little more. I figured you wouldn't. For Pete's sakes, I'm gonna make him work too. Here are the facts. Once every 65 seconds, somebody develops the disease. So think about it, if we talk for an hour, what that impact is. So another little test that isn't in here, but I just like to do a poll. How many of you remember, and I call it back in the olden days because I graduated from nursing school in 1980. Sit on that for a second. How many of you remember hardening of the arteries? Look at this. How many of you remember senility? How about just old age? Just people, old age. And you know what happens when you get old? Your mind goes. Well, we know that's not true because when I graduated from nursing school, we thought all of those things actually, that's what we knew. And we also know that in 1980, Jerome Stone started, it was a family group that started the Alzheimer's Association. So we've learned a lot in a short period of time. So, is it part of the normal aging process? Are we all destined? How many people think, yep, it's just gonna happen? How about no? And that's one of the things that we've learned, and that's a significant change from 40 years ago. So, this is just an old people's disease. People younger than 65 don't get it, do they? Yeah. They do? You're exactly right. We think probably the youngest known person that I've cared for in their 40s. 40s is, and certainly I think we'd all agree that's pretty darn young. So whenever someone has the disease, there are things and concerns that we think about. The concerns are a little different when someone is 45 and maybe they're still in the workforce, or they may have children at home.
Dementia is the
Can you see that we don't say like haven't gotten in sync here? So what we're going to do, actually, please go back, Rob.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow and the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. and frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual, but there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
One of the things we get questions about a lot is, well, you know what, it's not Alzheimer's disease, I just have dementia. You just saw in the picture really that what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? So dementia is the broad category. There are different types. And I like to think of it, it's like cancer. Cancer is a collection of symptoms. That's the heading, but we know there's breast cancer, and there's testicular cancer, and there's colon cancer, and there's lung cancer. So we think of dementia is that collection of symptoms. And there are different types. Alzheimer's disease is typically the largest type. So why is it important to get an early diagnosis? Because I'll tell you, I've had people say to me, Amy, there's no cure, and I don't want to know. Why might somebody want to know?
Certainly having the diagnosis of Lewy body was helpful in our planning because we began to understand where this was coming from in the brain, where otherwise we would not have known. Like we knew something was happening, but what was it? To give it a label actually helped, although it was a big umbrella. You know, it explains some of the characteristics and symptoms that we were experiencing and seeing.
Well, I think we all want to know that. One of the things I like to say is, don't guess. How many of you remember that commercial on TV? It was a Holiday Inn Express, and the guy says, well, I'm not a doctor, but I slept at a Holiday Inn Express last night, right? We think we're experts. Unless we are a physician or healthcare provider and we can do all of our own diagnostic testing, you know what? It's better to leave that to the experts. We want to know, and we want to have credible information. So here's kind of a summary of what we talked about. It's not a part of normal aging, and I think that's one of the things that has changed significantly since I got out of nursing school in the 80s. So what is it? What's Alzheimer's disease? What is it? Let's talk a little more about it.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alice Alzheimer described specific changes in the brain, what we call the formation of plaques and tangles. Now, Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and is thought to impact memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. The cerebrum fills up most of your skull. It is part of the brain most involved in remembering, problem solving, thinking, and even feelings. There are about 100 billion nerve cells, or neurons, throughout the brain that transmit messages in order for us to create memories, feelings, and thoughts. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to the brain tissue loss, or what we call shrinkage, and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, such as memory loss, problems with thinking, planning, behavioral issues, and even at the end stages, problems with swallowing.
So here's one of the things that I get a lot. Many of us think of Alzheimer's disease and we think of it as memory loss. Our brain is kind of mission control for our body. It controls everything. So we talked about planning, thinking, emotions, communication. Every action that we take, really the brain is responsible for. So it's not just memory problems when somebody has Alzheimer's disease. This is a great question. I get this all the time. So what's the biggest risk factor? And I think I get to quiz you on this one too. Okay, let's see who. I wish I had prizes. It'd be more fun if we had prizes. So what's the greatest risk factor known risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. How many people say genetics? How many people say family history? How many people say age? Well, Rob, did you go back to the winner? The winner is, it's age. As we get older, all of those things there's some they're potentially contributing factors, but as we get older, we have a higher risk of developing it. And a lot of times people say to me, well, Amy, I don't remember all of this Alzheimer's talk, all of this, years ago. Well, one of the reasons is, as I said, I got out of nursing school in 1980. I rarely cared for people in their 80s, much less 90s, or someone who was 100. And today that's much more common. I mean, we thought, in our infinite wisdom when we're 20-year-olds, that all those 60-year-old people were old, and clearly that's not true, right? So we didn't care for that many. I just didn't take care of that many people, so that's one of the things we've seen. So let's hear from our expert.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's. And when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are two categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
So here's what it is. Age, and we all want to age, but we want to age in a healthy way, don't we? Because the opposite of aging is not aging, and I think we're all here because we want to continue to age and be healthy. Family history is a risk factor. I like what Dr. Snyder says, the difference between a risk gene and a deterministic gene. So things can run in families. Heart disease seems to run in families. Diabetes seems to run in families. Alzheimer's, again, there can be that familial connection. A deterministic gene means if you have the gene, you'll have the condition. So that's the difference. And individuals with Hispanic descent as well as African Americans have a higher incidence of the disease. So Dr. Snyder's going to walk us through the different stages of Alzheimer's disease. We look at it at three major stages. For the purpose of simplicity, early, middle, and late. The thing that's important to know is that there are different symptoms, and people can have symptoms of one particular stage. It's not an exact science. It isn't as though everybody fits into each bucket. So you know what?
One of the things that
Go ahead.
impacts our brain is all the other things that can happen to us as we age. And we know that Alzheimer's is the most common risk factor for getting Alzheimer's disease is age. But we also have lots of other things that go wrong with us as we age. And so how those other health factors impact our brain can also impact how Alzheimer's presents in other people.
You know what, Rob, could you just choose on a different kind of forgetting? Because one of the things we think about is, well, I forget. How many of us forget things all the time? Okay, so here's the different type, and it can kind of give you a little bit different perspective. Go ahead.
It really, really is. It's not just forgetting where I put my car keys. It's much deeper than that. And for example, I cannot read a book. I used to be a voracious reader because by the time I turn a page, I had forgotten what I had read. And if you're reading a novel, you have to know what transpired before it in order for you to continue to read on. And so I can't read a novel, so I've even stopped trying.
More experts.
Alzheimer's affects everyone differently. As a result, it's difficult to place a person in a specific stage of the disease. However, there are 3 general stages that are commonly referred to as early, middle, and late stage Alzheimer's. In a medical context, you may hear these stages referred to as mild, moderate, and severe. In the early stage of Alzheimer's, an individual may be able to function independently. However, they may start noticing more frequent memory lapses.
I didn't mean to do that. Just trying to.
Memory or concentration by conducting a detailed medical interview. Middle stage Alzheimer's is typically the longest stage and can last for many years. Damage to the brain cells can make it difficult to express thoughts and perform routine tasks, and this can lead to increased feelings of frustration and anger. In the final stage of the disease, an individual loses the ability to hold a conversation, control their movements, or respond to the environment around them. Cognitive skills, that is their memory, thinking, and reasoning skills, continue to decline, and this can lead to personality changes and need for round-the-clock care.
Key point here, everybody's different. Not everyone experiences the disease the same way. We're all individuals, we all have different underlying health issues, so that's really one of the key takeaways. It's a trick question. This is a trick question. True or false? There are several drugs available to slow down the progression of Alzheimer's disease. How many of you say that's true? How many of you say that's false? Rob, what one is it? It's false. There is no treatment that prevents or changes what we call the progression of the disease. Now, medications, we're going to talk about it a little bit more. Medications can improve symptoms, and it's important to know that medications work for some people. We're all different. Some medications work for a period of time, so it's a very unique situation. But the medications that are approved are not what we call disease modifying. And what disease modifying means, it changes the course of the disease. So we'll talk a little more about that. Go ahead, Rob.
There are currently several drugs that are FDA approved to treat the cognitive symptoms associated with Alzheimer's disease. They treat the symptoms, but they don't treat the underlying cause. So eventually people will progress, but they do treat some of the symptoms and help people for a time. So the first class of drugs are cholinesterase inhibitors. These drugs work to prevent the breakdown of acetylcholine, which is a chemical messenger found in the brain that's associated with learning and memory. There are 3 FDA-approved drugs that are in this class of drugs. There's Aricept, there's Exelon, and there's Razodine. There's another class of drugs that modulates glutamate, which is another chemical messenger in the brain that's associated with learning and memory. And this drug is called Namenda. And then there's a final class, which is actually a combination of cholinesterase inhibitors and glutamate modulator. And this is called Namzaric.
So I think this is a misconception. Now, does that mean that medications may not, you shouldn't try medication? Absolutely not. What it means is that it's symptomatic relief. It doesn't necessarily, it's not going to change the course of the disease, but absolutely, in consultation with your physician or their healthcare practitioner, you want to see if that's the right decision for you. So So let's touch on research, because people say to me, well, what do you mean there's nothing that can stop the disease? Research, when you think about it, even though Dr. Alzheimer identified those changes in the brain in 1903, long time ago, my grandmother was born then, I had to do the math, she would be 116 years old. Our disease really is a younger disease. We talked about the Alzheimer's Association starting in the 80s. So I never learned about that in nursing school. It wasn't that long ago, it was the 1970s. So research and looking and trying to figure out what the heck makes these changes happen in the brain is critical. Why don't you hit early intervention, please?
This is an incredibly exciting time in Alzheimer's and dementia research. The advancements that we've made in the last decade to understand the disease is a continuum, meaning that the biological changes are starting a decade or more before someone is experiencing the changes in the memory and thinking. This sets the stage for possible prevention. The idea that when we have the tools to identify those individuals at the earliest time point, and when we have the interventions to target individuals at that earliest time point, we can intervene to stop or slow the progression of the disease before an individual loses their memories.
So before we touch on lifestyle factors, I have heard many times, people will say to me, you know what, my mother was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, but you know what, Amy? When I look back, I know that there were some changes that were going on sooner, and that's what we're finding. The changes in the brain happen long before their symptoms. And so that may be a key to trying to figure out how to intervene, how to change the progression of the disease. But by the time we're seeing those symptoms, the disease has taken hold.
I'm excited about what we're learning these days regarding lifestyle. One of those things that we've seen in the past of things like exercise and nutrition have now started to gain more momentum to indicate to us that it can change your ability to slow cognitive decline. That is really the first stages of Alzheimer's disease. This may include things like social engagement, mental cognitive training. It can be things such as exercise, it can be nutrition. All those things are now starting to point that they will lower your risk for Alzheimer's disease.
So before we jump into anything else, one of the things, how many of you have heard, we know what's good for our heart. February was National Heart Month. It's all the exciting things like exercise and diet and not smoking and managing our blood pressure. And so the thing I like to tell you that if it's good for your heart, it's gonna be good for your brain. But here's the exciting thing. We believe that there is some connection with lifestyle and this disease. But you know what, just because we think it's there, we think it's there. The Alzheimer's Association is currently funding one of the gold standard type trials, which is called a prospective randomized double-blind placebo-controlled clinical trial. Okay, mouthful. And actually it is looking at the impact of specific lifestyle interventions to be able to see and hopefully find out and to be able to say with confidence, if you run the 50-meter dash, it's gonna help you. I'm kidding, but I hope so. We started enrolling participants in Wake Forest. It's actually going to be, there will be 3 clinical trial sites. Wake Forest, there will be a location to be determined in the Midwest and the greater Chicagoland area where our home office is. And then we're also going to be enrolling individuals in California. So this is really exciting. It's called the US Pointer Study. And I'm enthusiastic because we've been saying, if you're doing that good lifestyle stuff, wouldn't we all like to know that there are things within our control that we can modify? So it does take a long time from enrolling people and going through the study and then analyzing the results and all of that. That's a very long process, but it's also very hopeful.
A lot of hope does come from the Alzheimer's Association, all the research that is being done. Even though there is not a cure today for the disease, I know in my heart there is going to be a cure one day.
And I know we're getting closer for that cure. Because even if you fail in a research study, you learn from that failure in the research study. That failure always brings progression.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I didn't know when I joined the association, the Alzheimer's Association is the largest non-governmental funder of research to find a cure for Alzheimer's disease.
It's more important than ever for people to participate in clinical studies. The fact is, right now, we don't have an effective treatment to stop Alzheimer's disease. And if we don't have people participating in clinical trials, we never will. And so participating in a clinical study is one way that everyone can get involved in a very direct way in the fight against Alzheimer's disease. And for people who currently have dementia or Alzheimer's disease, there are some additional benefits. You get access to very close medical care. You also may be among the first people to have access to the treatments that will eventually prove to work.
Sometimes you hear the phrase, it's a failed trial. That means that it didn't hit the end point, it didn't achieve an FDA-approved drug. But I would say as a scientist, the only failed trial is one that doesn't give you valuable information. And if the trial is well designed, if it is a good scientific experiment, you get extremely valuable data so that you can plan the next trial and do the next study even better than the last one. And it gets you that much closer to that FDA-approved drug, to that effective treatment, and maybe someday even a cure.
That's exactly what I think. Sometimes we only look at it as a glass half empty. Every time we learn what doesn't work, we're closer to getting to what does work. So when I heard this in this perspective, I looked at things a little bit differently. Because just like anything else in life, we need to know what isn't going to work. So I like the optimistic approach. There's no such thing as a failed clinical trial, with the caveat that it was a well thought out, well designed trial. We're getting close. We're getting close. Get the Amy and Rob show. We're gonna have to practice, aren't we? This is the first time we've done this, clearly. So, but let's talk about what resources there are for you or for other family members. This is the purpling of America. The only reason I really love that slide is, of course, I like purple, clearly, but we are available nationwide. We have the best resource. So I told you I was going to tell you my best resource. So before I let you learn a little more about it, it is our 24/7 helpline. It is available 24/7, holidays, you name it. Issues don't happen Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. And why I love the helpline is that we have dementia experts who are trained to answer the call. So I mentioned to you that I work from the Bonita Springs office. I haven't been in the Bonita Springs office, I was in the Bonita Springs office Tuesday because I'm on the road and covering a lot of areas and doing education just like this. So our helpline is always available. And here's a couple ways people can use the helpline so I can kind of show you the whole continuum. Maybe you'd like to know if there's a support group in your community. You don't know where to call? You can call a helpline. It's not a critical need, but it's an important need, wouldn't you agree? What about in Saturday morning at 3 in the morning, and you're a caregiver for your dad, and you wake up and you go into Dad's room, and Dad's not there. And you look all around the house and you can't find Dad. And you look, and you know what? The back door's open. That's a crisis. Our helpline can help with that too. Certainly one of the things that you would want to call the helpline first. There's some things to do, but you're going to be pretty upset and anxious and concerned to have a plan. The helpline can deal with those issues too. And the beauty of the helpline is that after you've had an opportunity to speak to one of our care consultants, they will probably say, Rob, you know what, would you like the person, would you like me to have the local representative follow up with you? And Rob can say, no, you know, I'm good. Maybe I just needed to know where the support group was. But if Rob was in the scenario where his stress level was here, and our helpline will help kind of manage through that, he may say, oh my gosh, please, could you do that? And through the wonders of technology, somehow that call gets into what I have a vision that like hops into my call queue. I can see that Rob needs me to call. I know what's going on, so what I can do is I can prepare before I call him, so I don't have to say, so Rob, what are we talking about today? Like, isn't that annoying anyway? Don't you love it when you have to tell your story 5,342 times? No, I can look at that and I can say, wow, Rob's dad got out, here's what the concern is, so that I do my research and I kind of know where Rob lives, so I can at least be available and be a support for him so that I'm more prepared. I love the helpline. So you can do the helpline. Click on the helpline.
I've had a couple of phone calls that I've been able to make in to the call center. When I've had a couple of quick questions that I wanted to ask. You know, there's been a couple of nights, 2 o'clock in the morning, you have questions, you have anxieties, and I was struggling dealing with them, and it's amazing. It was one of the best things I ever did, was keeping the call center on my favorites now. Just to know that there's somebody you can call who is aware of what you're going through.
Yes, sir.
Go next. We also have tons of information online. It is like, I call it an information tsunami. So usually what I like to do is after I've spoken with someone and we really know what area the information they're interested in, I can send that via email. It's a little bit easier because I could get lost in our website. I could be on our website learning new things for at least a week. So I know, and I want to make sure I'm really respectful of our time here. I'm going to be available for a while. I'm happy to answer questions, but Rob is here. Now you have to have noticed the green, orange, purple bus. I mean, you can't miss the bus. That's the bus. That's our mobile office. Called the Memory Mobile, but we have information, resources, all kinds of things. And Rob is going to be here for the entire session today. So if you have questions, he's happy to help. And I'm happy to do that too, but I want to make sure we're getting on with the agenda. And I don't know what's next, so. Well, thank you.